So first of all, very warm welcome to you, Andrea. I think many of us are here to hear about how really Kanban is used in bigger organizations. A little bit about it, Andrea, a little bit background. She was first introduced to Lean Kanban in 2011 when she joined Rolls-Royce to support a Lean Black Belt project, which had the aim of implementing a true Kanban approach within engineering. After receiving 1 year of daily coaching from a master black belt, that must have been quite intensive, she became the focal point for the topic in the company. Since then, her role has evolved from a team assistant to the global lead subject matter expert for Kanban implementations and practices within the company. Her main focus is on engineering, but she also supports all other areas in the business, such as IT, logistics, HR, commercial. While still working for Rolls-Royce, she co-founded Holia GmbH in 2016, a business where she focuses on combining modern management with mindfulness and leadership development. And her talk today has a provocative title, Kanban Implementation, Allowing versus Forcing. Andrea, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm really honored to be here, and also a bit humble because I'm speaking after a keynote speaker, especially someone like Christina, who's very calm and clear about everything. It's definitely a challenge to keep up with that level of presentation, but I definitely do my best. I would like to ask you, if I may, to put your video on if possible. If not, it's also fine, but please participate. And also feel free to use the reactions that we have within Zoom. So if it's too fast, or if you want me to go even faster, which I doubt will be the case, but let's see, please feel free to press those buttons or raise your hand if you want to say something. So as Mark already mentioned, I've been working with Rolls-Royce since 2011, and back then I supported the Black Belt project. And after 1 year of working in that area, I already thought I now understand which practices have to be applied, and all it takes now is to convince people to actually apply them in their area. And that often actually ended up in frustration. And the more I get into the topic, the more I see that the insights that come throughout the practices just require different approaches, and that the people are not just as important, but I would say even more important than the practices. And that bearing in mind, or like understanding where they're coming from and their maturity level is actually key. So in the last 10 years, I've supported implementations, and to a point where we now have about 900 boards and about 7,000 users globally. And of course, it brings quite a lot of challenges, but also some nice insights. So I would say that nowadays I'm a lot more humble than I've been when I started. And as in every topic, the more you know, the more you are aware of what you don't know and how much there is to learn still. So before we get into the topic itself, I just want to clarify a bit of the terminology that I'm going to be using, just because there are different connections in everyone's head when we give certain names. And the first one I want to go into is Kanban. So Kanban is often referred to as like in connection with the lean methodology from Toyota. And in my context, I'm using Kanban as a tool for visual management. So translated Kanban just means visual signal. And that's also how I'm going to be using it. And I think that it can be applied with lots of different approaches. And one approach is the lean process flow line. So that is used for process management, end-to-end value stream. And that's actually how we have started in Rolls-Royce. And after a while, we found out, oh, there are actually resources that we cannot share across or cannot dedicate to a process. So we started creating team boards to support the processes. And those were mostly arranged in a so-called Scrum approach, and Scrum, as you might know, is like for team or task management, has lots of different tools in the set. And the next level up would be for project management. So that is the scaled agile, where you have different hierarchies. You have a strategy, then the portfolio level. Sometimes, there is 1 or 2 or 3 levels in Rolls-Royce on top of that. And at the end, it comes to the execution, which is done or broken down into deliverables and tasks. So also referred to as flight levels sometimes. And that we use mainly for the NPI project, so new product introduction. But we soon found out there is not a one size suits all. So what we're trying to do is to put all of them in a box and find the best approach for us. And one thing to mention is that the approaches, as you probably know, they have a lot of commonalities. And the overall goal of all of them is alignment and focus. So I personally, and I'm not shy to say that, my preferred approach is always lean, because it takes a bit more effort to implement, and it delivers so many more benefits. So you have more effort to implement, but you have a lot less effort to maintain it. And so over time, the effort up front pays out a lot, and it's a more holistic view. So what we have created was then, and we're going more and more to that direction, to go away from the scaled agile, the initial approach, and go into a model where we have to a certain level, like the first 2 levels, maybe scaled agile. The mid-level is then a sequence of processes, and those processes are often, since we are so specialized, supported by teams where we apply then agile task management as much as possible. So the first poll is, I'm going to bring that up now. Which model do you find more promising? So without any influence, thank you, from my side, I was just searching for the button still. So without any influence from my side, please share what you find more promising. And I have to say, forcing, I deliberately chose a strong word, but actually it means to have a structured implementation and to apply the principles from the start with standardized approaches. So it's not so much like the command and control approach. I just wanted to use a strong word here to really highlight the difference. All right. Oh, quite even, actually. That's interesting. Let's just wait 1 more minute. Actually, 30 out of 34 have voted. 4 more. Not sure if I count in there. No.
The co-host cannot vote.
No, too bad.
You want to close?
Cannot influence.
Do you want to close?
So, yeah, so yeah, please. So now allowing is at 61% and forcing is at 39%. And I would assume that if we really start a conversation now, which I would love to do, but given the time, we have to postpone that slightly. Exactly, Karin already wrote, it depends. So I would assume that from those that said forcing and from those that said allowing, said, well, certain things would probably have to be forced, certain things, you know, you have to allow to evolve. So it's probably not the 2 extremes that you have voted for, but something modified for both of them. So very good. Oh, let me just close that. Okay, so based on that poll, I would now like to ask you, and we're doing that with the chat questions because it takes a bit of text and I didn't want to use Mentimeter. Which factors would be in the way based on your experience, next question already, which model would be best for you, and the top 1 or 2 reasons why. So when you post your answer, please first say what you decided for, then the industry you work in, and the 1 or 2 top reasons for your decision. So which advantages did you want to utilize and why you think this is the best approach? And if you can, just put it as one in one box, because otherwise some other people might answer in between and then you have to search what belongs together. We have about, like, let's say 2-3 minutes.
I think you need to press Alt-Enter to just if you want to put line breaks in.
Good tip, thank you.
For me, it's not working with Alt or Control Enter.
That's fine. Somebody suggests Shift Enter. Let's try.
Shift Enter. Sorry.
Yes, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, so that's a good example. It says forcing, because almost no knowledge in the company and a faster startup, and that's coming from IT. And especially when it comes to IT, I guess the majority would take the agile approach. So yes, that's definitely faster to set up. And there you also have quite a fixed framework that you can just adapt. Very interesting. Then we have Oliver says allowing and coming from banking. I don't see the pros there. Dimitar, forcing for the lack of a better word. Exactly. So software need to build momentum first, then move to allowing. Very good. Like that one. So we have another one, allowing, also from IT, lots of IT related professionals here. Traditional environment, not flight levels, tight space for the teams, very different specializations. Having at least a few structured framework elements make it easier to orient. Mindset change take time, step by step, to improve existing process. So yeah, I really like your answers actually, and it also shows that I would assume from what you have written that the majority already has some experiences in implementing. Keep the team in sync and same stage during the transition, and that's why it's for forcing and software development. Here we have one allowing, Sonja, also from software. Interesting. If you do it right, people will think they have done it on their own. I like that one as well. And forcing to have something to start with. Okay, so yeah, very great answers, and I definitely agree on most. I haven't seen anything I wouldn't agree with as of now, but that doesn't matter anyways, because we're open here and also learn from each other's experience. Prefer freedom of creative choice, going for allowing. The catches of, okay, so the catch is actually something that we're going in now. So now it was a top reason for your decision. Now we're going to look at what factor, what factor would be in the way of taking the opposite model. So if you now chose allowing or forcing, why would you not choose the other one? So if you can name 1 or 2 disadvantages, and you can just you can shorten it and say, I don't know, a double Doppelpunkt, what's Doppelpunkt? Semicolon. And then just name 1 or 2 disadvantages why you think the other one doesn't work as well. It was already indicated in some of your answers up front, but maybe we can get a bit more harsh on that. And you can again make it really short. The format that you had was really good, so that we can go quickly through. Takes a lot of time. So the opposite would be allowing. So it takes a lot of time to get started and see results or a difference. Very good. Not a steep learning curve. Then we have allowing. In the public sector, it is common that people are taught how to work. Oh, I like that, Florian. Thank you. That's yeah, so true. Also, again, shows that it really depends on the people that you're dealing with, and also what they're used to on the culture of the organization. And that culture might sometimes be different from one team to another, I find. So then we are following. Two people are afraid of everything that, or people are afraid of everything that changes. That's, I guess forcing was the word, but yeah, true, high level of resistance. Then if people do not have any say, the change might not be sustainable in long term. That's definitely the topic of accountability and engagement, which is very important. Yeah, why should they follow the new approach? Need to discover hot water again. Also nice saying. People should innovate out of experience and not out of ignorance. Yeah, maybe we can deepen that. I think that alone would be a topic on its own that we can fill an hour of talk with. Very nice. Then Ingo said, this is difficult as an initial forcing. It perhaps requires to get something going. Not quite sure if I understand that correctly, to be honest. But it could relate to the factor that with allowing, actually no, the opposite would be forcing. Maybe you can specify that, or we have some time hopefully to talk about it still. Okay, so I just take two more. Some team members might be reluctant and have no intrinsic motivation to adopt an agile working mode. Yeah, definitely true. And you cannot force people into understanding something. You can just enforce doing stuff. This one, I think, would be another hour of discussion, because there the question is like the chicken and the egg. So and maybe like the conclusion that I personally have come to would go into that direction a bit. That there could be a hybrid model, just to sneak peek a bit. Too big switch needs to exist. Also true. All right. So when I prepared the presentation, I did a bit of brainstorming and just listed a few, and many of them you have already named, and I think if not all of them. So the forcing and allowing as opposites, we have both of them have risk and advantages, and I'm sure like from your post I can find a few more advantages here, but generally, oh, I'm not sure why it's like it's jumping on its own without me touching. Anyways, so in the forcing, as it was already mentioned in the chat, we have an imposed learning. However, there's a steeper learning curve on that behalf, because we are applying insights from other areas. We help to apply certain principles from the beginning. But that also means when we standardize that there's a lack of customization. So if then people want to do something different, it always needs to be in line with the overall strategy and layout maybe. So another factor is definitely the effort to prepare. Especially if there's a momentum, people want to get started quickly. They don't want to have a lot of effort, many workshops, and that is certainly a pro point for allowing. However, this approach, if not structured, if you don't bear the top level needs and demands and principles in mind, it might end up in chaos. And then it's a bit more difficult to clean that up and to get back on a learning curve. And one of the big ones, I think, is like the bottom one for me. And again, those are all my personal viewpoints. So one of the big ones is that we might have a lack of engagement and accountability if we let's say, force. So if we apply a certain standard and just tell them what to do without them being able to help modify, to customize it, to shape the approach for their needs, we might lose some very important and meaningful insights, and also the engagement and accountability of the team. We often still do that because we want to have a holistic approach, and also want to be able to combine data across different areas and compare them as well. And here the holistic approach is contrary to the silo evolution, but the silo evolution might also bear an advantage, which is new insights. So if we tell everyone what to do, we might miss an opportunity to develop something completely new that would work well as well in our area. So there is not really a right or wrong, I would say. Now I want to ask you to contemplate what would be needed to mitigate the risks of your chosen approach. So as I just showed, there are disadvantages for both of them. And if you just pick the one that sticks out the most for you personally, is there anything that you could do to mitigate that risk? So as a result, also, what would be the first action to take? So if you're now implementing Kanban or agile or lean in a particular company or in your team, and you choose the allowing part, for example, how would you achieve that, for example, the principles are also applied, or that you have the benefit that you're actually hoping for, and the other way around as well. So that's actually one question where I'm most interested into the answers. I think I did the timing earlier to check it, and now it's like switching as it wants. What does the timing say, by the way? 22 minutes. All right. So speaking fast actually helped. So maybe we can have a bit of a discussion.
So you can slow down a bit.
Yeah, well, actually, I would like to speak a bit with the other, like here, instead of just reading out from the chat.
It's always good when you realize you've got more time.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking right now. Let's see where we got first, the next slides. Also bad that I don't see the time, the overall time at the moment anymore. I'd explain that there will be some forcing, ask for a bit of patience and buy-in, then gradually move into allowing as the people gain experience. So basically telling them, there is a bit of a starting help, but you guys still own it, and it won't take long. Like, it just takes a bit of starting help before you can actually take over and start structuring and molding the approach. So Carolina said the danger of choosing allowing is that everyone would end up doing their own thing. To prevent this, I would firstly educate the teams about the different frameworks method, teach them the rules, perfect them, and then become creative. Yay! Shuhari. Yeah, so that's definitely just be honest about it, exactly. So yeah, that's certainly also going in the direction that I would probably take, or not probably, that I would take. Classical teaching should have its place as well. Yeah, and that's what I mentioned earlier. So even if you have voted for one or the other, it probably won't be just that. So we're all applying common sense, and that's why I'm so passionate about that topic also, because in the Kanban community, we often have advocates for a particular approach. So we have advocates for the lean side, we have advocates for the agile, the scrum side of it, or the safety. We have advocates for applying, let's say, the Kanban maturity model from start to end, which also like has both elements actually. It has the, let's say, forcing, but in a way of we offer you a standard that you can then use to evolve. And that's actually what I personally hope. We had that similar conversation yesterday. What I personally hope this community will go towards, that we really see what are the needs and how can we be a bit more like open-minded and flexible, and also appreciate that there are many different approaches, and the majority of that works quite well. So I suggest nudging, combine forcing and allowing. Perfect. Commit to some general rules and interfaces and allow details. Allowing can lead that everything will stay as it is. True. Therefore, I should challenge the status quo. Then people will be dissatisfied and want to grow. Yeah, very good. So to basically trigger an intrinsic need to become better. That, by the way, also works well if you have two teams and you both you allow them to do similar things and you allow both of them to explore for themselves. Then there's a bit of competitiveness, and they then also learn from one another. I'd make them look deeply at the nature of their work and let them talk about how to best manage this mess, which is usually is, I agree. From this discussion usually evolves some approach that the team agrees and is committed to. With that, I agree as well. In my experience personally, and I just had that, a meeting that goes in line with that perfectly. What often happens also is that they stay on a micro level with those, let's say, evolution steps. And I think one thing that is important is that you always take a step back again and see what is the overall goal? How does it need to be aligned? And are we really addressing the root cause rather than just the symptoms? So Matthias and Mark probably know that terminology well. It's coming from theory of constraints, where we always look, and Lean has the same, it's like the 5 why. So often we look, and I also use the word here, mitigate the risk rather than addressing the root cause. So that's something that I would like to always highlight and encourage everyone to do, to see when we address a topic, when we challenge something, why do we actually challenge it, or what is underlying there? Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, I'm a big promoter of there's not one size suits all. And like my personal insight is that the approach to take is really determined by a lot of factors. And I shouldn't have done the timing thing. Sorry for that. And the main factor, I believe, is the company strategy and demand. And whatever you choose, to bear in mind what is the overall strategy and what is the overall demand. So, for example, if I wanted to, if I'm in a large organization like Rolls-Royce, we want to have data from one area and even site to another that is comparable. We want to have certain metrics that everyone uses and understands. And that is certainly in line, or that needs to be considered when doing an implementation. However, the mindset of the leaders and teams also plays a role. So as I mentioned earlier, if the maturity and the openness to seek for change, if there's not an internal seeking for it, but if we have to impose it, it's becoming more difficult. So finding a way that you can really address the needs of the teams and the leaders, managers, however you want to call them, and at the same time support the company strategy within the environment that you work in. So a company structure, if you have a metrics organization, for example, or the industry would determine it. I think that's really the key. And then with those high-level holistic approaches in mind, there's not much that you could actually do wrong, I believe. So being open-minded there, and always, again, remembering what the overall goal is definitely, for me, the key to that solution. And yeah, sometimes it does take a systematic and standardized approach. but we also sometimes have the luxury of evolving over time. And with that, I actually want to come to my initial conclusion. Or my current conclusion. And I'm saying that intentionally because my conclusion 5 years ago would have been a different one. So if you might hear me 5 or 10 years from now, I might say something else. I don't know. But that's actually what for me also was the biggest advantage of that learning or of that journey, that new insights are always triggered, as I have put here, or learning is always triggered by new insights. And if one can remain humble and open-minded, we can really take advantage of the opportunities and don't build an ego over the expertise that you have, because that might prevent you from evolving. And so again, my personal conclusion is to let people learn for themselves. But again, the Ida Goldratt quote, standing on the shoulders of giants. So if you help them during the initial implementation phase and provide continuous coaching, you can ensure that the overall goal is understood and the approach is aligned, that the key principles are applied, and you have to just think about what is it that is really important to adapt from the very beginning. And for me, things like capacity-based planning, so having in Scrum, for example, the sizing and the capacity backlog and a short time frame that we do it for, or the transparency when we talk about a lean approach, that we have a process mapped out and not just gate 1, 2, 3, and that's it. And then we have 100 cards in each of those gates. Decide for yourself and based on your experience what the key principles are, and make sure that or help the teams to apply them from the beginning. Also, in order to ensure, so the coaching, the initial support and the coaching would ensure that there's a steep learning curve. So whenever there's a plateau, that's when you jump back in and help the team to discover the next step in their evolution. And very important, prevent excessive rework. And that's my number one argument when people say, I want to completely start where I am now and not apply any of the principles. And we had that conversation earlier. So with language, for example, if you learn a language not properly and you get used to a lot of, let's say, wrong grammar, wrong pronunciation, it's so much more difficult over time to undo that instead of doing it from the beginning. And golf is a similar. So if you start to swing and you have, let's say, 2 years of practicing that wrong swing, your golf trainer is going to have a hard time correcting that instead of if you go in from scratch. So in our approach, we do a requirements understanding, then go into the solution development, the solution deployment, a bit of go live support, which means trainings and also coaching during that time. And what's really key is the continuous coaching. And unfortunately, I have to say that this is a part where Rolls-Royce especially just lacks resources. So we don't have too many people who are doing that. And I think this is the most important part of it all. And let's see if that changes next year. I'm fighting for it currently. And similar to, so when we talk about the last point, the preventing excessive rework, I find it similarly important to choose the right digital tool from the start. And I have to say, I know what I'm talking about. So we have started with a different tool, and we then switched over when we had a population of 5,000 already. And of course, it takes a lot of effort, even though it went really smoothly compared to a lot of other transitions. It would have been something that I personally would have appreciated to have at an earlier time or not at all, because having the right tool brings also that extra level of engagement. And when we changed to the new tool, people were so excited. They love the functionalities, and now it's spreading even faster than before. And what we have done, as I mentioned, we had a different tool, and then we've done some analyses. And here we started off with 20 tools. And so just to name the last 4 that were in our list, We made an analysis of 200 points, 200 different criteria. We rated them differently. So if you do that analysis, it might come to a different, let me just see what's coming here, result. But it was really clear for us that Kanban was the #1 tool. Again, it depends a bit on what your requirements are, but if you look at that picture, it actually doesn't really matter what requirements are, because each of them Kanban scores the highest. And the point here would even be higher if we took the Power BI into the account. So we don't even have the integration with the Power BI mapped here. So again, if you're yet at the beginning of the journey or haven't decided yet, I have a clear recommendation. And I'm not just saying that because we have 2 great people from Kanban in the training. And as a, let's say, last page, what I just want to highlight again is that the overall goal really plays a big role. And I think we can all agree that we have similar overall goals when we apply those methodologies and when we implement a digital tool. And while we have quite a few, and empowering teams to take ownership and achieving transparency and focus, I put it in the middle because it's very important. However, what helps the company most, I feel, is to really act on meaningful data and to focus the efforts to where they have the highest impact. So going away from zero optimization and really going into holistic optimization. And with that, the rest evolves naturally, basically. So yeah, we now have, how many minutes do we have left? What time is it?
About 10, 9, 10.
Yay, perfect. So now we can have a bit of a conversation before we, so maybe like 4 minutes, 5 minutes. And yeah, I would just like to, such a great slide from Dimitar. I would just like to invite you to unmute your phone if you have any question, your microphone. If you have any questions or would like to make a comment, share an insight that you have, which might be similar or contrary, both are appreciated. So before I now spend the 4 minutes asking you to say something, I'm remaining silent and hope that somebody is eager to share. Not all at once.
I'm sure there will be somebody. Dimitar.
Actually, I have a question, if you allow me to. I'm curious how you do things at Rolls-Royce with respect to forcing versus allowing, and especially around standardization. I know it's a challenge because having like 6,000-7,000 people and trying to standardize metrics across such a huge population is a big challenge. What do you see working with respect to collecting data? Is it allowing, or is it forcing, or is it a mix of the two? So if you could please share about that.
Yeah, it's certainly a mix. So we have some, like especially in the operational processes, where we have repetitive processes, we have the same process across different sites in different teams. We go for the forcing, so for the standardization, we have a process mapped out, and there we also have aligned data. So we are currently actually in the development again to see what are the targets and how do we break down those targets for the different teams, what are the actions that we need to take. So for the operational side, where we have repetitive processes, we have a standardized approach. We are now starting also to have a standardized approach with the product introduction, but only for certain levels. So of course we cannot foresee everything. It's not like a stable tech time, but we try to at least map out the process steps, also to understand the interfaces and to see when do we have to, for example, fix the design iteration. And then there are other areas like IT, like HR. There's basically do what you want. We help them. So again, I'm preferring always a lean approach, so having a process mapped out. However, if they have 10 different processes that they have to support, and they say, actually, we just want to do task management, then we just help them to manage a bit more efficient, I would say. And I don't mean that in a judging way. It's more, we help them to identify their issues, or to like how the board structure would have to be to identify their issues, to do reliable planning, understand their capacity, and also drive the focus to where improvement initiatives are required. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So yeah, it's always a balance, and it's so difficult also because if you had let's say 10 teams and 5 people supporting them, I think it would be a different story. Being as I mentioned earlier, I'm like trying to get 2 more people like now to support full time, and I hope it's gonna work next year. But being, let's say, a lone writer in that field, I can see there's so much more to do in so little time. So if the capacity is there, lots more coaching, and probably also a lot more standardization.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, maybe the first one to know. All right, so to close off the session, I would just like to ask you, and please be honest. I'm not fishing for compliments here. I just really like to know, do you think it was worth the time that you have just spent now, the 45 minutes together? And have you gained any insights? And if so, I'd appreciate if you could just put in the chat what your key takeaways were. And if not, what could I have done differently? So I know I speak very fast, for example. It's sometimes difficult to follow, especially when I'm under time pressure. But again, please see that as an opportunity to improve if there was something that you see could be done differently. And yeah, just help us or help me evolve, not just the presentation, but also by sharing your insights. Oops. And again,
I don't think you were too fast, Andrea.
Sorry?
I think you had a very good pace.
Thanks.
Can I still ask a question while everybody is composing their thoughts? Can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
I find it fascinating to be able to work in such a large organization with so many different teams and approaches. And I mean, it's a very nice, I don't know, laboratory almost, if you can say so. From what I hear that you're saying, and what many people also in the comments, when they made comments and so spoke about, is initially there's some forcing applied, and at some stage it goes over into the allowing, so to kickstart the entire process. Do you have some statistics, some ideas as to in how long it takes, and in how many cases you've been able to transition from the forcing to the allowing? Because obviously there's culture changes and things that need to happen also to allow all of that.
No, I have started, so I have an implementation board, and I've started to also log some time, but there's so many factors determining the time frame that there's not really, I cannot really give a valid answer to that, I'm afraid. When we talk about a big implementation, by big, I mean, so we are planning, for example, right now to have an implementation which involves about 800 people, and we do that in stages. So the initial stage always takes the longest, obviously. So there we probably need a preparation time of like, let's say 3 months, 4 months, depending on how familiar we are with the process also, and how much work needs to be done. And then they usually get like a starter kit. So we're really closely involved at the beginning. And then we have about a couple, maybe 3 months, 4 months for them to just get used to that approach, to the board, before we then hand over the ownership and say, okay, now like we do a pilot phase, we do reviews, what went well, what needs to be improved. And only once we have the first, let's say 2 to 3 months, we then take the next stage and roll it out to the next area. And so the actual ownership there, and also the allowing, when the team feels really engaged, usually takes, I would say, 2 to 3 months. While in teams, it's from the beginning. So we have an initial meeting of like a couple of hours. They have the board and then they go. And then we have a review after 2 weeks, then another one after another 2 weeks, and 4 weeks, 3 months, and so on. So it really varies on how complex the area is. If we have a team of 20 people, the allowing starts right away, especially if they don't have any interfaces.
I'm definitely going to attend your conference presentations next year to see how this evolves.
Yes.
It also brings us to the end of this session. Thank you very much, Andrea. You started out with that very controversial question. When I first looked at the results, I thought, well, the answers are going to be as I expected. It was something like 80% for the no, forcing is not right, so the allowing. But then it started evening out a bit. And I think if you now would ask the question, many people would complain and say we need a third option, that we need both. So just my feeling, I think you've done a good job to argue for both sides.
Thanks.
So thank you very much for everybody for participating. And
very nice feedback.
Yeah, now it's time to hasten to your next session, but you may just have some time to do a body break and get a coffee while we get ready. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.